we're going to dive into the concept of supply contracts. It really is a big component. I've been emphasizing a lot about inventory, but really the inventory, part of the structure of the inventory is impacted by the supply contracts. So we're talking about a lot of different components as to what really makes up a good contract, because there's a lot of variety that you can possibly have out there because you have different people all in the different supply chain that will sit down and you'll be part of that supply chain. And what is your role? What's their role? And can you sit down and benefit from that relationship? And for many years now, we've talked about outsourcing. It's been increasing, increasing, increasing. If you look at a company like Nike, Nike is known for making spectacular shoes, good clothing, and they have spectacular design. They have a great marketing program, but they don't make anything. All their stuff is manufactured by other manufacturers that make their product. They clearly manage the outcomes of it. They clearly put the expectations out there, but people are manufacturing stuff underneath their name and they're putting it out there. They're the ones making the soles, the uppers, and everything else in the process. They put it in a shoebox and they're not Nike employees. That they're outsourcing everything, and pretty much Nike is what we call a virtual corporation. They have this over here, and they have these nodes of different people that do different things in the process. That is not uncommon in the world today. A lot of times you go outsourcing and then even offshoring to make certain that you're trying to get the best rate for labor costs, because labor costs dominate almost every industry because it is so expensive. So, in survey after survey after survey, a lot of managers want to increase or maintain their outsourcing because of the fact it does a couple things. One, if this contractor out here isn't doing your expectations, you can get rid of that one and hire this one over here. The problem is if you fire too many, you could be in hot water because of the fact you have a problem. But you know what? I had a problem the other day and I had to sit down and talk to somebody, and they sat down there and apologetic and they really chewed on the employee that really messed up and the problem. And I got spectacular service out of it because of the fact that I had control over the contract. They're not my employee. Okay, you would think that my employee would have more control over, but not really. I actually had more control over the person that was in charge of the contract because they wanted to maintain that. That is a real positive thing if you're a manager running around putting out fires all the time with employees. If you can sit down there and stop the fires by having somebody else put out their fires, life can be good. There's other problems though, and you have the job security thing and a lack of loyalty. That's part of it. So you'll see a lot of that. A big driver, though, for all managers in the supply chain is searching for low cost countries. You want that because you're trying to farm out the labor, but you got to make certain because you're farming out the labor. Let's say it's done in Mexico. Let's say it's in Brazil. Let's say it's in Indonesia, Thailand, France, whatever it may be. The issue really comes down to you're looking for low cost countries. You also might get low cost labor if it's not trained properly. So you got to make certain that your standards are very tight and they'll do exactly what you want them to do, and it won't affect the overall product quality. So, but then that's part of that whole thing of developing closely collaborate. Those are actually big words. By collaborate, collaboration means a period of time goes by and you develop a certain sense of trust with the person. Trust is a cute thing to write on a piece of paper, but writing it on a piece of paper doesn't mean you get it instantly. What you get trust with is over a period of time, you get to know the person, that they're going to do what they say they're going to do, or if they struggle in a couple areas, you'll understand what those areas are and have a long-term rapport with them, overcoming that and developing that relationship. It's called collaboration. Sometimes you're going to collaborate the strategic components, making certain that the soles for your Nike shoes are perfect, but the laces aren't a big deal. Okay, so the non-strategic components like laces, you can buy laces almost from anybody. Okay, but the reality is some of the cores, like the inner sole of one of the Nike's greatest shoes for Olympic athletes, okay, really needs to be perfect and everything. So that you only just that one supplier. Laces, you can have 15 suppliers for laces, depends how wrapped up you get in the job. So that being said, a lot of times you want to look at the procurement strategies, you want to develop relationships, and they can be different. Like you need to have strategic ones here. Only 2 on planet Earth are good for you. Here you got 17. You can interchange between them. So you look at explicit supply contracts, that how much are you getting from it? If we do this, you may have different goals, different agendas. You put that all in the contract, the expectations. So we'll talk about that. Here are 5 different areas that are pretty common in most contracts. Pricing and volume discounts. If I buy this much, what will my pricing be? And by the way, if I buy this much this year, will my price drop? If I buy, you put that right in the contract. minimum, maximum. You need to buy a minimum of 1,000 to qualify for this. And over here, but if you get 20,000, you too can sit down and have a discount over here. That is commonly in the contract. Lead times and schedules, this is really hard to do in the aspect of okay, yeah, I need to have lead time over here, and then if so, I can do this. That's in the contract a lot of times, a little bit harder than the other ones above it. But that being said, then the product or material quality, you're looking for this type of thing. Okay, for the buildings they want, there's 5 different types of painting. Over here, commercial is normally 3, but I want to have special stuff over here. I want the painting to be as good as a residential, so I want to have a level 1 over here. So you sit down and you put that right in there, and here's the expectations. In the industry, there are actually written standards to say what level 1 painting is and what the expectations are. You can sit down and refer to general industry standards or develop your own and put them clearly in writing. One big thing is the product return policies. We're going to spend more time on that one. That's a killer in the aspect of trying to return things. That what do I do with this? If you're Costco, you're working the front desk, customer comes in, there's nothing wrong with the product, it's just purple, and they've had it in their garage for the last 9 months. It's already out of style, you've already sold out of it. This is a one kind only thing. You have a return anything by your members policy. Oh my gosh, what do you do with this ugly purple thing? Okay, so you're stuck with this thing over here. So can you return it to the people that Costco originally had it 9 months ago? Or do you have to sit down and toss it in a dumpster and write it off? Those are issues to worry about. In the sequential supply chain, each party determines the course of action, usually in the interest of their own best interest if you don't have it in writing. That's why you want to sit down and have it in writing as often as you can, and don't get too micromanaged. But part of it is developing that relationship and trust, and you got to use the language to make that happen. So, does the buyer assume all risk of having more inventory than sales, while the supplier takes no risk? You'll end up sharing the risk if you don't have that, or you may not have that supplier or vendor. The buyer sometimes limits the order quantity because of the huge financial risk. Sometimes it's a matter of they put all their eggs in this basket, you become their 75% customer. 75% of all their sales go to you. That's really great because you have that security, except for the fact that if it's not a fixed contract for a 3-year period, do you want to sit down and have 75% of your manufacturing capacity guaranteed to somebody else who could sneeze tomorrow and dump your contract? Sometimes it can be a financial risk and could destroy your company. That's why you sit down and have it in writing. That's what a contract is about. So sometimes the buyer limits order quantity. It's a risk that could be out of stock. It's a two-way street. If you want to sit down and not commit to so much, okay, and then the manufacturer may change and may not have that next round. Risk sharing, increase both profits if both entities sit down and do well. Buyback contracts. That's a contract where you have something over here. If I don't sell it, will you buy back my inventory at the same cost that I paid for it? That is exceptional, and there's a two-way street in that. We'll talk about a little bit later, but the reality is, okay, I bought this product over here. Okay, if I don't sell it in the period of time that I want to sell it, and sometimes you define that within 1 year, just depends what your contract is like, what you negotiate, then can you buy it back for full amount that I paid for it? Or for 90%, or for 80%. It depends. The problem is the supplier that gave it to you, or sold it to you, they might have an obsolete product sitting on their hands that they don't know what to do with. So got to pay attention to that. Revenue sharing. The buyer shares some revenue with the seller. So the buyer does that over here. So all of a sudden, both sides benefit. That really is a positive thing. So the more both sides benefit, the more they get profit based upon the risk. Sometimes you have flexible quantity contracts. What if a full refund for returned items, as long as the number of returns is no larger than a certain quantity? That way you're winning, and that way you're not being stuck by having dogs that are sitting over there because the retailer doesn't care or just accepts junk back in the process. So that being said, that really helps an awful lot, and you'll have different clauses like that are standard in an awful lot of contracts. Sales rebate contract, a direct incentive to increase sales by means of a rebate paid. So it depends what you're out there. So look at the sales rebate contract as an option. Global optimization, what is the most profit both supplier and buyer can hope to achieve? That's what you need to sit down and focus on. That's a win-win for both, is what we call it. So is that relationship really good? Is it intact in the process? Effective supply chains provide incentives both to all the partners out there and replace the strategies of global optimization. Really, you're looking at everybody trying to win. If that happens, you start developing long-term relationships especially because of the fact there's a certain dependability in the process. The main drawback on optimization on a global basis, it doesn't provide a mechanism to allocate supply chain profits between the partners. If you can get over that hurdle, you may have a really fabulous time. On the basic or contract components, here's the basics. Make certain they're in your notes, not just for this class, but for your long term when you're dealing with supply chain contracts. Pricing, volume discounts, minimum, maximum quantities, lead times and schedules, it's a big deal. Product or material quality and product return policies. I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. And the aspect of buybacks and revenue sharing. All these components, we refer to them on a regular basis in contracts because that's a lot of times what you're going to hinge upon reliability and also making certain that you limit your risk because all the partners are looking for exactly the same thing: reduce the inventory, make the profit, no stale inventory, and make certain that I'm successful as a company. Everybody wants to know what's in it for me, and you put that into your contract. Take care.